Thank you for joining for this episode of the TechSpective Podcast. My guest is Kumar Vikramjeet from Adobe. So, Kumar, if you could give some background on yourself and what you do at Adobe, that would be great.
Yeah, sure. So thanks, Tony, for having me. I'm Kumar. So I work as a senior security engineer in Adobe threat hunting team, and I've been working with this team for a few years now. So right now, there are not many companies that have a threat hunting, so it really helps Adobe to be above the curve. So just to give a little bit of background about me, so I've started my career from Bangalore. So in Bangalore, India, I was working as a software engineer, and I was always interested in security, information security. So then I decided to do a master's, and I came to US to pursue my master's in information security. So I did that from Carnegie Mellon University, Pittsburgh. And since after graduating, I've been working with Adobe since then. So I think it's been 7 years, or about to be 7 years. And yeah, it's been a good working experience at Adobe. And I've been involved with various projects that involve security engineering, machine learning, automation, and threat hunting. So yeah, it's been great. And yeah, I feel lucky to be a part of the threat hunting team because there are not many uh, companies that are really investing their effort in this field.
Okay. Well, I wanted to have you on because of the blog post you wrote recently dealing with behavioral analytics, specifically UEBA. So to start with, I guess can you, for the listeners, just kind of explain like what is the acronym UEBA stand for, and just like a high level overview of like what is UEBA?
Okay. So UEBA stands for User and Entity Behavior Analytics. And in general, it's a cybersecurity process that uses machine learning and data statistics to identify unusual activity pertaining to a user, or it can be entity. So entity is a broader term. IP can be entity, assets, devices, all of those stuff. Router can be an entity. So it's about
Right.
finding unusual activity pertaining to user or entity. So that's it in a nutshell.
Okay. So I understand this, but again, for the listeners, um, I guess just a little overview from you on how does that play into cybersecurity? How does UEBA help me be more secure?
Yeah, yeah, that's a good question. So right now in security sector, there are lot many tools that offer different capabilities, and also we have different platforms or tools that developers use or tester use to support their workflow or whatever task they have to achieve, right? And because of all these tools, you get like plethora of logs coming to a SIEM solution, like whatever security teams are using to detect incidents or threats. So at the end of the day, it becomes very hard for a security analyst to really identify what actually is something that they should look into. And security teams, they don't have infinite resources, right? There is a limited number of people who are working in the team. So yeah, so to tackle so many logs coming into their queue, they have to like prioritize what they need to work on. And so they build static rules to look into it. So that might be affected. That might be effective in some cases, but not in most of the cases. So what UAB helps us, and it helps us in trying to minimize the scope of the detection. So there might be some priority cases that we want to look into. So it really helps in prioritizing those use cases, what you want to look into, and then drilling down the alerts more by doing some additional steps like enrichment and correlation of alerts from different log sources. So doing correlation in a SIEM solution it's hard, but doing it in a platform like a UEBA, it is far more easier because you can see uh, alert generators from where the alert is actually coming, and that helps you in correlating it further. So it really helps you in bridging the gap between traditional tools that we have in place.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So, yeah, I mean, basically, as is implied in the name, sort of, it's like your UEBA is allowing you to kind of automate this process of looking for anomalous activity. So, like, I'm based in Houston, and if I worked at Adobe, you would know, okay, Tony logs in from Houston, and from a UEBA perspective, you might, it would be a point of interest if all of a sudden I logged in from, Berlin, Germany, or you might know that my device that I log in from every day when I'm working is a Windows 11 laptop, and all of a sudden I'm logging in from a Linux machine. That might be something that would raise some suspicions. Is that kind of the right track?
Yeah, that's what UEBA aims to do. And so this is a scenario for a user. So basically, what you're explaining is like unusual login for a user. So there can be additional use cases that we might want to tackle. So say your login coming from a Tor IP, or say IP that is known to have some relation to malware, right? Or phishing links. So there are domains which host phishing sites, and if we see like related user activity coming from those kinds of IPs or domains, we have to raise some suspicion, right? So that we can act upon that. So yeah, so this is like a user scenario. Similarly, there can be IP scenario that is the entity anomaly detection part. So say there is an IP which is trying to connect to say hundreds of other devices. So it can be a part of like lateral movement stage of intrusion. So yeah, so similarly, if we try to catch that, it will help us uh, in catching the intrusion when it is actually happening.
Okay, so in previous podcasts, I've actually talked with I'm not going to remember the name off the top of my head, but I've done a previous podcast with Adobe on the topic of zero trust, and so I was just thinking, like, does this tie into that? Does this, because like basically sort of like what's the next step of, you have this UEBA data, and you're looking at all this data, you're identifying, okay, that seems weird. I'm assuming there's some kind of a scoring where you're saying, okay, if I have enough of these weird things, now I'm going to raise, an alert, or I'm going to actually do something. I'm going to trigger an action based on there's too many anomalous things going on here. But you also have to kind of balance the, okay, Tony's not logging in from Houston. That's suspicious, with, okay, but Tony also needs to be productive. So you don't want to just block me every time you see one anomalous thing. There has to be some sort of a scoring system, I'm assuming, and some sort of an automated, some sort of a connection, tie-in with like a zero trust type environment, or like a MFA type situation where you're somehow triggering and saying, okay, you know what, this seems anomalous. Let's trigger a multi-factor authentication, and make Tony prove that he's Tony. Is that how it works? I'm speculating.
Yeah. So let me go back a little bit. So there are two terms that are sort of very similar. One is UBA and one is UABA. So UBA is precursor to UABA, and UABA has been there for, I think, far longer than UABA. So UBA stands for User Behavior Analytics. UABA stands for User and Entity Behavior Analytics. So these terms were defined by Gartner, I think, a few years back. So when you're talking about user behavior anomaly detection, we have been doing that for some time, and that was a different project that is successfully running for, I think, few years now in our network. So, and we are using that intel in our current UEBA project. So we are like trying to encompass our intelligence together. So say a scenario when we detect user activity, like suspicious activity going on. So what happens is we alert the user. So it's similar to what Dropbox does or Google does. So you're coming from, say, unknown location, right? So say suddenly you visited, uh, you log in for a different country, like say India, and you always log in from US, right? So Google will alert you that it looks like you are from unusual location, right? So something similar we try to do, and like we have to get user confirmation like most of the time. So in this project also you have to make sure you get user feedback about whether it is really them or not them. So that adds a lot of useful context to the alert, right? And other than that, like some alerts that they have high fidelity suspicion. So like with a good accuracy that this looks like something bad going on there. So assume there is a login from Nigeria or like Bangladesh where the user is not supposed to be, right? So uh, those activities can be directly sent to a security analyst and they look into it. But for some alert that looks suspicious, but it might not be, in that cases we have to get feedback from the user. So that's how we balance it out. So it depends like what's the alert looks like. If it is highly looks like highly malicious, and we have seen such logins coming in the past, and so we'll directly send it to SOC. And if it is like maybe suspicious and it is worth asking the user, then like we just contact the user and get the info.
Okay. Um, in your blog post, and for the listeners, I will link to and reference the blog post, along with this podcast. You list out like kind of 6 elements or 6 steps that make up your UEBA framework. Can you walk through those?
Yeah, sure. So these are the 6 stages, which basically comprises the entire UEBA framework. So the first one is use case. So before you start working in UEBA, you have to think about what's your uh, prioritized threat models looks like. So different company have uh, different goals, and there are certain things uh, that are like crown jewels for them to protect, right? So for a financial company, it might be something different. They might have a different threat models. For a technology company, it can be different. For say hospitals or companies who are working in healthcare, they might have something different that they want to protect, right? So yeah, so every company might have their own situation, what they want to detect. So and these threat models that we define, these can be converted into use cases. So use cases are detection rules that can identify certain suspicious or malicious activity going on. So, for example, assume that we have a use case where we want to uh, alert a login coming from high-risk countries, which we know, like most of the attackers originate, like say Russia or maybe from China. So we know that there are some hackers that are trying to intrude the network. So we can have a use case like that, which you want to tackle. And so this is a use case part. And once you have the use case, you have to. So the next stage is data source. So you will have to get a data which will be where you'll apply a particular use case, right? So the data are mostly stored in a SIEM platform. So it can be Splunk, it can be Datadog or Logstash. So there are a lot many SIEM platform there. So what we basically do, we get the data from the SIEM solution, and we have to minimize it as per the use case. So in general, platforms and tools, they generate a lot of data, and we need to only scope it as per the threat model what we are interested in. So that's what the data step does. So it's just basically application of that use case. And For our use case, we divided the log types into 5 major types. So those are application, authentication, network, host, and cloud. So these are the 5 types that we came up with. For some other company, they can have like 10 types or maybe 20 types, like whatever they're interested in, and however they want to scope the anomalies. So after this, we have analytics stage. So in analytics, we deal with anomaly generation using machine learning and data statistics. So for us, we already had a tool which does this for us. So I think in 2021, we released a project called OSAS. So this is a open sourced anomaly generation engine. So we just use that. We already had that, and we use that uh, engine to generate anomalies for all the use cases that we have. And we use, like, for use cases in a practical way, we use a term called pipeline. So pipeline is just something that is implementing different stages of UEBA. So anomaly generation is one stage, data grooming is one stage, right? So these are machine learning steps that needs to be performed.
Mhm.
So yeah, so after you generate anomalies in analytics stage, then you have to go around refining those anomalies and filtering out false positive, whatever we can. So after that, there is a correlation stage that comes, and then enrichment and detection. So in correlation, we try to correlate different anomalies. So if you just generate anomalies, we will have the same issue that we had earlier, that is like too many anomalies and too many alerts. So we have to curtail the number of anomalies that we deal with, right? So we'll try to correlate anomalies from different use cases or pipelines. So assume that there is a anomaly for a user from a cloud use case, and there is another anomaly coming from authentication use case, right? So when you look at both of these together, they might tell you a story about a incident that might be happening in your network. So it's very important to correlate them. And once you correlate, then we get to the enrichment step. So enrichment is important for filtering out false positive alerts. So in enrichment, we look for trusted data that we have in our network. So we know, like, we have certain data sources that we completely trust, like say IP access data, and there are some trusted IPs that we know that belongs to our company. So if user is coming, there is certain level of trust that this might not be malicious. This is like a benign traffic. So that step we do enrichment, and finally the detection. So in detection, uh, we try to score the anomalies so that we have certain uh, scoring methodology going on. So for scoring, we look at the age of the anomaly, we look at the diversity of use cases at which this particular user generated anomalies, and we also look at the severity of alert. And these can be tuned as we go. These are not like a static value. Yeah, so once we have detection done, then this can be sent to a SOC analyst or a security analyst. They will look into the alert and they will give good feedback. So once they have feedback, once we have the feedback, then we'll go around and we'll try to improve our anomaly detection process and improve the model so that we filter out false positive if we are seeing. So yeah,
Okay.
that's how the 6 stages. Yeah.
Okay. And I wanted to touch real quick on the correlation part, as the kind of the importance of that from my perspective, and not being an expert in this field by any stretch, but just from the perspective of alert fatigue and noise, that like if you didn't do something like clustering the anomalies by entity, and you had an entity, like I'll stick with that I'm normally in Houston and now I'm in Berlin. It's like if you start to see, okay, well, Tony logged in from Berlin, Tony's laptop logged in from Berlin, Tony, I access an application from like if every single thing I do raises another alert about, oh, that's weird, that's coming from Berlin this time. that gets noisy really quickly. Like you need the system to be able to say, yes, that is actually all the same thing. That's actually all one thing. Tony and his laptop are in Berlin.
Yeah, that completely makes sense. So yeah, so correlating and enrichment, they're like very important step. If we don't do, then SOC analyst or user may get drowned in number of alerts, and we basically want a cumulative picture what the user is doing. And if there is an attacker in the network, we need to know a cumulative picture. So
Right.
say in a phishing scenario, so you'll see a phishing link getting dropped in a user's email inbox, and user clicks on it. So each of these activities is getting logged, right? And you can catch it in different use cases. And next, user gets compromised after the shared credential with untrusted party. So this also gets recorded somewhere. And next, you see attacker login from an unusual location. So there is a series of events that happens, right? So you can't alert on all of these. You have to look at the complete picture. And when you look at the combined picture, so this is one series of use case. There can be another use case for cloud compromise. There can be another one for, say, a device compromise or an insider threat. So it really helps in looking at the big picture and then reaching to a conclusion. So if you give a complete picture to a SOC, go ahead.
No, well, I was just going to say, I think that it's a very good segue into the next thing that kind of popped into my head, which is, do you have control over sort of the aperture of this, and can you configure it to make it more permissive or stricter? Like and I'm assuming, like, and actually I'm going to assume the answer is yes, kind of based on the way you described the 6 steps or whatever, because once you kind of go through all of it, the whole thing, and you then go back and analyze and say, okay, well, how did it work? I would assume that part of the point is to say, okay, well, did we have any false positives? Did we have any false negatives? Like, where do we need to tweak this so that we get a more accurate understanding of what's a real threat?
Yeah. So we can tune it at various levels. So it can be tuned at a place where we are generating anomaly. So as I told earlier, we are using OSAS as an anomaly detection engine. So at that engine itself, we can tune what we really call anomaly. So there are certain labels that are defined in OSAS anomaly detection engine, which can define what really pops up as a anomaly, right? So you can define there that if these events or these data fields appear, say, 0.1% in the log, that's what I regard as unusual activity. We can make it 2%, we can make it 1%, we can make it 0.5%. So depending on the alerts that we get, so that's what we can tune at the anomaly detection stage. We can do that. We can filter out anomalies at later stage also when we are doing enrichment and correlation and scoring. So in scoring also, you can think about we are seeing a lot of alerts for this particular cloud account, but we know that this is a management account, and um, or a particular activity is operational activity going on. So this needs to be just whitelisted. So we can define those things.
Okay. All right. I don't think I don't have any other questions. I mean, if there's any parting thoughts you want to share, that would be fine and great. If there's a question you hoped I would ask that I didn't get to, I think this sounds, it sounds like the kind of thing that organizations need, because like we've talked about in a couple of different ways, there's such an overwhelming volume of data, and there's so much noise, and it's so easy to get overwhelmed with information that you need something to be able to automate and filter down to say, okay, but this is something you should actually pay attention to. Like, this you don't have to focus on all this stuff, but at least look at these things.
Yeah. So yeah, I think information overload is a major problem right now in the security realm. So there are a lot many platforms that generate an alert, and it really becomes hard for a security analyst to look upon and that might delay incident detection, or we might not be able to detect at all. So say after 3 months, when a, a customer got compromised, you came to know about a particular issue that is going on, right? So that is like a very delayed response when attacker already did the work that he was planning to. And so that happens mostly because we were not able to look at a particular alert on time. So UEBA helps in that. So UEBA really trying is, so not many companies are working on UEBA solution. Like there are some commercial tools that are available, but they might not fit uh, in a particular corporate structure because people use different SIEM solution, they use different EDR solutions. So you need something that can talk to all of these different tools and and give you the intel that you want. So in our case, we chose to have our own UAV solution because uh, we can be flexible about the threat detection that we want to have in our platform, and it really helped us in trying to bridge the gap between different tools that we have. So yeah.
All right. Well, thank you very much for taking the time to join me.
Thanks, Tony.
I appreciate you investing your time to listen to the podcast, but I also invite you to engage on social media. Please go like our Facebook page and follow at TechSpective on Twitter and Instagram. You can feel free to let me know what you like, let me know what you don't like, let me know if you love it, let me know if it sucks, and let me know what products you'd like to see reviewed or what questions you'd like to see answered in future posts.